I should have known better, but you never really know what you're signing up for until you're deep in the middle of it. I started working the night shift at a small, run-down convenience store in a sleepy part of town. Nothing fancy. Just me, the flickering fluorescent lights, and the sound of the occasional car passing by. It was supposed to be easy money, a way to pay off some debts. But I quickly learned the night shift is not for the faint of heart. It started on my first night. I remember feeling the weight of the silence, the kind of quiet that settles over you like a heavy blanket. I was standing behind the counter, chewing gum and trying to pass the time when the door chimed. A man walked in. Tall, wearing a long coat despite the warm weather. He seemed out of place, but I didn't think too much of it. It wasn't unusual to get strange characters in the store at that hour. "Just a pack of cigarettes," he said in a low, raspy voice, not making eye contact. I scanned the cigarettes and gave him his change. As he walked out, I noticed something odd: his shoes. They were caked with dirt, like he'd been walking through mud or something worse. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. The door chimed again, and I moved on to the next customer. It was about an hour later when the door chimed again. This time, it wasn't just one person, but three. 3 men, all wearing hooded jackets, faces shadowed. They didn't speak at first. They just stood there, staring at me from across the room. There was something cold in their eyes, like they were waiting for something. I felt my stomach churn. I tried to remain calm, to pretend nothing was wrong, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. They slowly walked to the counter, one of them pulling out a wad of cash, their eyes never leaving me. It was like a game. A twisted game. "How much for your time?" one of them asked. It was such a bizarre question, I almost didn't respond. But I smiled, trying to stay professional, even though the pit in my stomach was growing. "I just work here," I said. One of them leaned in closer, his breath sour. "Oh, we know. We know exactly what you do." His voice was low, dangerous. And then it hit me, these weren't just customers. There was something off about them, something I couldn't place. The way they moved. The way they spoke. Like they had a mission. They weren't here to buy anything. They were here for me. "Have you ever wondered what it's like, to be watched?" one of them whispered. I froze. I didn't know how to respond. Before I could even process their words, they turned around and left as suddenly as they had come. The door chimed again, and they were gone. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the door, trying to catch my breath. My pulse was racing. I glanced around the store. The aisles were still empty, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, suffocating almost. It felt like I wasn't alone, like something, or someone, was watching me. I tried to shake it off. But the unease lingered, gnawing at me, eating away at my nerves. Something about that encounter felt wrong. Very wrong. As the night dragged on, the quiet became unbearable. Every little sound seemed amplified. The hum of the refrigerator. The drip of the leaky faucet in the back. The distant, hollow creaks in the walls. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I'd turn quickly, but there was nothing there. It was all in my head, I convinced myself. But then I heard it. The sound of someone whispering my name. It was so faint I thought I was imagining it. But it came again, clearer this time. "Daniel," I turned, expecting to see someone standing there, but the store was empty. Just me and the lingering feeling of eyes on me. I checked the time. It was almost 3 a.m. The peak of the night shift. The moment when the darkness seems to come alive, and the hours stretch on endlessly. I tried to focus, to get my mind off the eerie feeling creeping up my spine. But then, from the corner of the store, I saw it. A shadow. It wasn't just a shadow cast by the dim lights or the shelves. No, this was different. This shadow moved. It darted across the wall, then disappeared around the corner. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed the nearest flashlight, hoping to make sense of it, but when I rounded the corner, there was nothing there. I stood frozen, flashlight trembling in my hand. My mind raced. It had to be a trick of the light. Or a rat. Maybe a stray animal. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. Something was out there in the darkness. Something that wasn't supposed to be. And I had no idea how much worse it was going to get. The silence was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint buzz of the neon sign outside, felt like a death knell echoing in my skull. I tried to shake it off, tried to laugh at myself for getting so worked up over a shadow. But deep down, I knew I had felt something. Something that didn't belong. I paced back to the counter, trying to collect myself. The lights flickered again, casting eerie, distorted shadows on the walls. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was them, the men from earlier. Were they back? Were they watching me from the dark corners of the store? I glanced at the clock. It was almost 3:30 a.m. I had about 2 more hours left in this nightmare shift. I tried to distract myself by organizing the shelves, anything to get my mind off the creeping dread that had taken root in my chest. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every time I turned a corner, I'd find myself scanning the room, expecting something, or someone, to be there. Then the door chimed again. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was late. Way too late for anyone sane to be out shopping. My heart thudded in my chest as the door slowly creaked open. I forced myself to glance up, my eyes struggling to focus in the dim light. A man stepped inside. He was tall, too tall, and his face was obscured by a dark hood. He walked in like he knew exactly what he was doing, with a slow, deliberate stride, his footsteps heavy but measured. The air in the store seemed to grow colder, like his very presence was sucking the warmth out of the room. "Help you with something?" I asked, my voice sounding more strained than I intended. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled, dirty piece of paper. He placed it on the counter without a word, his fingers brushing the surface like he was trying to leave something behind, something for me to find. I stared at the paper, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It was an old receipt, covered in smudged, faded ink. But the thing that struck me the most was the date. It was from the exact night, a year ago. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "How did you?" I started, but my voice caught in my throat. The man didn't answer, just stood there, watching me with those dark, unblinking eyes. The kind of eyes that seemed to pierce through to your very soul. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away, he whispered, "You've been here before." I backed away from the counter, panic rising in my chest. Something wasn't right. My eyes darted to the door. The air in the room was thick with tension, and I could almost taste the fear that was choking me. "Leave," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "Just leave." But he didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, staring at me, as if waiting for something. And then, the lights went out. The entire store was plunged into darkness. I gasped, my heart racing. The sudden lack of light made everything feel even more suffocating. My flashlight. I fumbled for it in the dark, but my hands were trembling too badly. My mind raced. Where had he gone? What had just happened? A voice cut through the silence. "You should have left when you had the chance," the man's voice echoed, but it was no longer the voice of a man. It was deeper, distorted, as if something had taken over. The flashlight flickered on, casting a weak beam of light across the room, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it. The shadow. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It was a figure, tall, thin, with a face that was just wrong. The eyes were too wide, the mouth too thin. Its skin was an unnatural, sickly gray. I could see it clearly now, standing at the end of the aisle, waiting for me to look. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape from. The store felt smaller, suffocating. The darkness wasn't just around me, it was inside me now. And then, the whispering started again. This time, it wasn't just one voice. It was many, dozens, hundreds, all whispering my name. The voices blended together in a horrible cacophony that made my skin crawl. It was like they were circling me, closing in from all sides. Daniel, I stumbled back, my eyes darting around the store, trying to make sense of it. Was this real? Was I going insane? The sound of footsteps echoed in the dark. They were too close now. Too real. I could hear them coming for me, and I knew, deep down, that if I didn't do something, I wouldn't make it out of this store. With every ounce of strength I had left, I bolted for the door. My hands fumbled for the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. It had always been locked. I turned, panicked, my heart hammering in my chest. The shadow was closer now, just a few feet away, and I could feel its cold breath on the back of my neck. "You can't leave, Daniel." I screamed. It was a primal, desperate scream as I shoved the door again. But the voices, they were everywhere. They were inside my head now. I couldn't escape. And just when I thought I would be consumed by the darkness, I heard something that didn't belong. A voice, familiar, human. "Hey, man, you alright?" I turned. It was my coworker, Tim. He was standing by the door, blinking in confusion. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The lights flickered back on. I stood there, drenched in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't speak. The shadow was gone. The voices were silent. But I knew what I had seen. "Just the shift getting to me," I said, forcing a smile, trying to make it sound like a joke. But deep down, I knew. The darkness in that store wasn't just in my head. It was real. And it was waiting for me to make a mistake. The rest of that night passed in a blur. Tim stayed with me for the remainder of the shift, trying to lighten the mood with small talk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. The air in the store still felt thick, the shadows too long and lingering. No matter how many times I glanced at the door or checked the aisles, I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. When the clock finally struck 6 a.m. and my shift ended, I felt both relieved and terrified. I didn't want to stay another minute in that place. As I stepped outside into the morning light, the cool air felt like a blessing. The daylight, at least, gave me some comfort. I told myself I was just being paranoid. That the stress had gotten to me. But deep down, I knew I'd seen something that wasn't supposed to be there. I went home and tried to sleep, but the images from the night haunted me. The shadow, the whispering voices, the man with the crumpled receipt, everything replayed in my head like a sickening loop. And then there was that feeling, the gnawing sensation that I had somehow been here before, that I was trapped in something bigger than I could understand. The next night, I decided to take a different shift. I told myself it would be better to face whatever was happening head-on, instead of running away. But I was wrong. I should have listened to the warning signs. I should have walked away from the store the moment I had the chance. Tim wasn't there when I arrived. It was just me, and the stale smell of the store that never quite went away. I hesitated at the door, staring at the flickering neon sign outside. The night was thick and heavy with anticipation. Something in the air felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. The first hour passed without incident. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous. But then, at exactly 11:45 p.m., the door chimed again. I froze, my heart racing. I couldn't believe it. The store was empty, and I hadn't seen anyone walk by. Yet, here was the sound of the door opening, the unmistakable chime echoing in the empty space. I turned slowly, expecting to see nothing. But there was a figure standing at the counter. It was him. The tall man with the dark hood. My stomach dropped. He didn't move, just stood there, his hands hidden in his pockets, his face obscured by the shadows. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My heart hammered in my chest. My mouth was dry, and I could taste the fear rising in my throat like bile. "What do you want?" I finally managed to choke out. My voice was barely above a whisper, shaking with terror. He didn't respond. He just stood there, watching me with those dark, unblinking eyes. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating. I could feel his gaze like a physical weight pressing against me. And then, without warning, the lights went out. The familiar hum of the fluorescent bulbs died, leaving me in complete darkness. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breathing, too loud in the silence. And then came the whispers. "Daniel," the voices were all around me again, circling me, closing in like a pack of wolves. I could feel their breath on the back of my neck, feel them just behind me, in my ear, whispering my name over and over again. I reached for the flashlight. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I flicked it on, but the beam of light barely cut through the thick blackness. And then I saw it again. The shadow. The figure. It was closer this time, just a few feet away. It didn't move like a human being, not anymore. It slithered, like something out of a nightmare, its limbs unnaturally long, its face twisted in an expression that I can't even begin to describe. It was no longer just a shadow. It was alive. It reached toward me, its fingers stretching, crawling closer, faster, as though it was hungry for something, my soul, my life. I screamed. I didn't care who heard me. My voice echoed through the store, but no one would answer. There was no one else here. I stumbled back, tripping over the shelves, my legs unable to carry me. My flashlight flickered once more, and for just a split second, I saw the store as it once was, quiet, ordinary, safe. But when the light went out again, the horror was back. "You can't run from us, Daniel." I felt it again, cold, clammy fingers gripping my wrist, pulling me back toward the counter. I screamed, thrashing wildly, but the grip tightened. There was no escape. I had to fight back. I had to. The door opened. It wasn't the usual chime. It was a violent, forceful slam against the frame, like someone, was forcing their way inside. And then, he stepped in. Tim. He was standing there, blinking in confusion, his face pale and drawn. "Dude, what the hell is going on?" Tim asked, his voice panicked as he looked around, but his eyes locked onto me, wide with confusion. I looked at him, the terror still frozen on my face. I couldn't speak. I was too scared. The shadow was gone, vanished into the darkness, but I could still feel it watching me. Tim stepped toward me, his hand reaching for my shoulder. "You need to leave, now." The door slammed shut behind him. The lights flickered one last time, and when they came back on, Tim was gone. There was no sign of him. He wasn't in the store. No trace. I was alone. And then, from the back of the store, I heard it again. The whispering. "You shouldn't have stayed, Daniel." The store felt colder than it had ever been before. The darkness seemed to hang in the air, a living thing, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating blanket. I tried to steady my breath, but it was like the panic had taken hold of my chest, tightening with every second. Tim was gone. Just, gone. One moment, he was there, standing in front of me, and the next, he had vanished without a trace. There was no sign of him, no hint of where he went. I had to be losing my mind. There was no way. But I knew, something wasn't right. The whispers were louder now. They were everywhere, swirling around me, crawling into my ears, my mind. I couldn't escape them. Daniel, I looked around, searching for the source of the voice, but I couldn't see anyone. The store was empty. Still. You should have left with him, Daniel. I spun around, my pulse racing, but nothing. No one. The whispers seemed to come from the very walls, from the floors, from the ceilings. Everywhere. I stumbled toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed the handle. But when I pulled, it wouldn't budge. It was locked. It was always locked. I pounded on the door, desperate to get out, but the sounds of the voices, the whispers, grew louder, mocking me. You can't leave, Daniel. You're ours now. I was trapped. I backed away from the door, my mind racing for any way out. My eyes darted around the store. The shelves. The counter. The flickering lights overhead. Nothing made sense. Everything was wrong. This wasn't a normal store anymore. It never had been. I had to figure out what was going on, why this place felt like a prison. Suddenly, I remembered the crumpled receipt the tall man had left behind. It was from exactly a year ago, the same night. I had to know more. I had to understand what had happened in this place to make it, like this. I ran to the back of the store, my heart pounding in my chest, praying that something would make sense. I pulled open the storage room door and searched through the shelves. Boxes of old, expired food. Cleaning supplies. Nothing of importance. But then, in the back corner, I found something strange. A small door, hidden behind a stack of boxes, almost as if it had been intentionally concealed. I hesitated. Part of me screamed at me to leave, to get out before it was too late. But another part, the part that wanted answers, urged me forward. I had to know what was behind that door. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle. It turned easily. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was small, and at first glance, it appeared like any other storage area. But when I looked closer, I saw what had been hidden, dozens of photographs, pinned to the walls. Some were old. Some were recent. They were of people, customers, workers, all taken in the store. But the expressions on their faces were wrong. They looked lost. Hollow. Empty. And then I saw something that nearly made me vomit. In the corner of the room, there was a small wooden box, covered in dust. I reached for it, and when I opened it, I found the worst thing imaginable. It was a pile of old, crumpled receipts. I gasped, flipping through them. They were from the store, dating back years. Each one was marked with a date, a time, but they all had one thing in common. Each one had the same name written at the top, Daniel. My blood ran cold. How had these receipts been here? Why did they have my name on them? It made no sense. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, the name, the dates, the time, they were all connected. Somehow, every year, someone named Daniel had worked the night shift. Every year, someone had gone missing, and every year, another would come to take their place. I was trapped in some kind of cycle. A nightmare that had been going on for far longer than I could comprehend. Suddenly, I heard it again, the whispering. But this time, it was different. The voices were more urgent, like they were pushing me towards something, forcing me to understand. You're next, Daniel. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. The door to the small room slammed shut, plunging me back into darkness. The air grew heavier. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the cold air, but I couldn't feel it on my skin. It was like I was no longer in control of my own body, like the darkness itself had taken hold of me. The lights flickered back on, but everything was wrong. The store looked different. The shelves seemed higher, the aisles longer, and the fluorescent lights buzzed louder, like they were screaming at me. And then, I saw them. The men from before, the tall man, the ones in the hooded jackets, they were standing at the end of the aisle, watching me. But they weren't just standing anymore. They were moving toward me, their footsteps slow and deliberate, their faces covered in shadows. "It's too late, Daniel." The words echoed in my mind as the figures grew closer. The tall man stepped forward, and I could see his face now. But it wasn't his face. It was mine. A twisted, distorted version of me. "You'll never leave, Daniel." I stumbled back, panic seizing my chest. My breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't escape. The store was no longer a place. It was a trap. The shadows surrounded me, closing in from all sides. I could hear their voices, feel them brushing against my skin, as though they were in me now. And when the darkness consumed me, I knew. I knew I was just another part of this never-ending cycle. Another lost soul to be swallowed by the night shift. I don't know how much time had passed. Seconds. Minutes. Hours. It didn't matter anymore. The feeling of being trapped, of being watched, it was all-consuming. Every inch of the store felt alive, suffocating. The whispers, the shadows, they were everywhere, crawling over me, inside me, pulling at my very soul. And then, everything went silent. The darkness that had surrounded me for what felt like an eternity lifted, just for a moment. It was like the store had taken a breath, like it had decided to give me one last chance to escape. But deep down, I knew there was no escape. There never had been. I looked around, but there was nothing. No figures. No shadows. Just the emptiness. The store seemed almost normal again, the shelves lined up neatly, the aisles orderly. But I knew it wasn't real. It was all just an illusion. I turned, desperate to find something, anything, that could help me make sense of this. My eyes fell on the counter, where the same crumpled receipt sat. It was the same receipt that had haunted me the night before, the one with my name on it. I grabbed it, clutching it tightly in my hands, the paper crinkling beneath my fingers. I looked closer. There, at the very bottom of the receipt, was something new, a date. It was today. But the time was wrong. It was still the same time as when I had first arrived. As if time had stopped completely. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. The door to the store was wide open. I could see the street outside, bathed in the cold light of the street lamps. For a brief moment, a sliver of hope pierced through the suffocating darkness. I could leave. I could finally escape. But as I took a step toward the door, the whispering started again. "It's not that easy, Daniel," I froze. The voice wasn't just around me anymore. It was inside my head. It was familiar, but twisted. Like it was part of me, clawing to get out. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. Standing in front of me, blocking my way to freedom, was the tall man. But this time, his face wasn't obscured by shadows. I saw it clearly now, it was mine. Twisted, distorted, like a funhouse mirror reflection. His eyes were black voids, empty and hollow, like they were sucking the life out of everything around him. "You can't leave. This is your place now, Daniel." It always was. My blood ran cold. I stepped back, my body moving without thought, my mind overwhelmed with the realization that there was no escape. I looked around again. The store was closing in on me, the walls seemingly pressing in. It was like the store had become a living entity, feeding on my fear, growing stronger with every passing moment. And I could feel it. I could feel myself becoming a part of it, becoming just another lost soul trapped in this never-ending cycle. The tall man took a step toward me, his face contorted in a sickening grin. "You're not the first, Daniel. You won't be the last. We all come here. And none of us leave." I backed into the counter, my hands gripping the edge as if it were my only lifeline. But there was no lifeline. There was no hope. There was only the endless night, the endless shift. And then, the most horrifying realization hit me. I wasn't just trapped in the store. I was becoming the store. The shadows, the whispers, they were a part of me now. I could feel them in my bones, in my skin, in my mind. They were a part of my soul. They had been slowly consuming me, little by little, until I was no longer myself. I had become another piece of this cursed place, another lost soul trapped in the cycle. And as the tall man smiled at me, his black eyes boring into mine, I understood. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was real. The store was a prison. And every night, someone new came in to take the shift, to become a part of the darkness. I was no longer just Daniel. I had become the night shift. The next day, a new face would walk into that store. A new soul to be consumed by the endless cycle. And when they stepped inside, they would feel the same cold dread, the same whispers, and they would never leave either. Because the store isn't just a building. It's a trap. It's the nightmare that never ends. And I am its newest prisoner. It's been years since I first started working here. Or at least, that's what it feels like. Time doesn't move the same way anymore. I wake up to the same store, the same flickering lights, the same relentless whispers. Every night, every shift, is a blur, a cycle that never ends, a pattern that's been etched into my very being. I can still remember the first night I walked in, so full of hope, eager to earn money to pay off debts. The store seemed so simple then, just a little convenience store on the edge of town. It had always been open. I'd never thought twice about it. But now I understand. I've come to know the truth. I am not the first. I am not the last. I am merely a piece in a puzzle I can never solve. And soon, someone else will replace me. It happened like this: the store shifts in its own way, every night. The aisles feel a little longer. The walls seem to press in a little closer. The lights flicker more, always just a split second too long. Sometimes, I'll hear footsteps echoing in the back rooms when I know I'm alone. And once in a while, just before the clock strikes 3 a.m., I'll see them, the figures in the shadows, standing just at the edge of my vision. Watching. The man who took Tim, who took me, he comes to check on me now. He never speaks, just stands at the counter. His eyes, my eyes, follow me as I move around the store. He watches me as I become a part of the store itself, becoming them. Every night, I lose a little more of myself, until there's nothing left but the shift. And I hear the whispers, always louder, always closer. They're not just in the air anymore, they're inside my thoughts, in my bones, in my blood. We're all here together now, they say. You are the night shift. The door rings again. It's just like the others. The newcomers. They come in, unaware of the fate waiting for them. I've seen it so many times before, over and over again. They walk through the door, fresh and eager, unaware that the store is already waiting for them. That I am waiting for them. They will become part of the cycle. They will feel the whispers in their ears, see the shadows move just a little too fast, and they will hear that voice. You shouldn't have stayed. Just like me. Just like Tim. Just like all the others who came before us. They will wonder, like I did, why they can't leave. Why they can't escape. Why they're trapped in this never-ending loop. The store is hungry. It's always hungry. It feeds on fear, on the souls of those who get trapped here. And it will take them, just like it took me. Just like it took Tim. Just like it's taken everyone before. But they will learn. They will know. And maybe, just maybe, when their eyes meet mine, they'll see the truth. That this is no ordinary convenience store. It's a prison. And there's no way out. I've watched countless others come and go since I became part of the night shift. I've seen them walk in, innocent, unaware of the curse they're about to inherit. They don't know that the store is not just a store. It's a predator, a living thing, feeding on their fear, their confusion. Each one thinks they're the exception. Each one believes they can escape. But none of them do. None of us do. The cycle is endless. Tonight, I know it's my time. I've been here too long. I can feel it in my bones, that gnawing sensation that something else is coming. The shadows in the store are thicker now. The air is heavier, more suffocating. The whispers have become more insistent. They're speaking to me in a language I don't understand, but I know the message: you can't leave. I thought that I could hold on to some shred of humanity, some piece of my old self, but it's slipping away. The store is changing me. I can feel the darkness crawling under my skin, taking root. The tall man, my twisted reflection, is always there, waiting. Watching. The voice inside my head is his now, but it's my own too. It's become a part of me. I've become him. I am no longer Daniel. I am the store. I am the night shift. But there's one thing I still don't understand. Why? Why does it keep happening? Why does this place exist? Why does it take us? And then, as if in response, I hear the door chime. The newcomer. It's time. I don't know their name yet, but I can feel them before I even see them. The door opens slowly, and I turn, my breath catching in my throat. There they are. The same. A new face, wide-eyed, looking around at the store with a mix of confusion and curiosity. It's someone else now. Someone fresh, someone who still has hope, still believes they can make it out. They can't. They will walk through this door, and they will stay. They will become another part of the store. Another piece in the endless machine that feeds on souls. They will feel the chill in the air. The darkness closing in around them. They will hear the whispers. They will hear my voice. You shouldn't have stayed. And as I watch them take their first steps into the store, I know, this is the way it must be. I was once them. A newcomer. Innocent, naive, thinking the night shift was just a job. Thinking I could just clock in, clock out, and go home. But there is no clock. There is no leaving. There is only the night shift. It's always hungry. Always waiting. And as they step further into the store, the door behind them slams shut. There's no turning back now. Not for them. Not for me. I look at them one last time. My reflection staring back at me from their eyes. It's too late for both of us. The cycle begins again.